Welcome to Spot Colts Radio. Thank you for joining us. I'm Matt Daly. I'm your host. Got a good show for you tonight. It's our first of our weekly installments of Questions with the Enemy. Tonight I bring along Jake Arthur along with me from Spot Colts, and we take it up with Eric Trickle from Spot Broncos. Gentlemen, thank you for joining me. Nice to have you guys around.
Thank you for having us.
Well, let's get right to it, fellas. This is a big week. Last year was a big game for the Colts. The Colts played in their house, and Peyton came to his old house, and the Colts took care of business. What are we thinking we're going to be seeing this week with Peyton in his new house? Are we going to see the same old Peyton Manning, getting himself used to where he's at now and making his plays, or is he going to fold? Is he going to fold against his old team? Is it going to be that Peyton versus the Patriots back and forth, where it's now the Colts, his ex-team that he just can't get over? Is there a hump, Eric, that you think Peyton can or can't get over with the Colts?
I think he'll be able to get over it. I think last year there was a lot of stuff that really contribute. I mean, obviously there's the offense and the defense both contribute to wins and losses, but a lot of it last year was, and it was a very, very emotional game for Peyton. Mm-hmm. I don't think that's anything that can be denied. I mean, he was returning to where he spent 15 years of his career at.
Right.
It's just it was just an emotional night, and I think that stayed with him, and that held him back a little. Not necessarily held him back, but just kind of affected him a little bit in his performance.
I'd have to agree. If I'm not mistaken, Peyton had a foot injury or something right before that game, didn't he? Or a toe or something. There was something that was hobbling him a little bit.
I think it was one of the two ankle injuries that he suffered during that season.
Mm-hmm. If my memory serves me right, the Colts got to him 4 times last season, and last year I believe there wasn't a large turnover in their offensive line. Is that right, Eric?
Not really. The biggest turnover is getting Ryan Clady back. Mm-hmm. He's an All-Pro, and he's coming back, and he's taking his spot back over at the left tackle position, which is allowing Chris Clark, who stepped in last year for him, to swing out to right tackle, and last year's right tackle, who struggled with speed and was a big issue against the Colts, as a matter of fact, is now playing inside at left guard.
Yeah, that'll definitely give him a little more familiarity with his spot. Will make that line link up a little better. There's no doubt. The Colts have themselves quite a task to get themselves over the hump themselves on the road, starting the season on the road against the Broncos, who were by far the best offense in the league and the best offense of all time last season. Like I said, the Colts last year, they got to Manning 4 times, caused 3 turnovers. Of course, one of those was Trendon Holiday getting stripped on a punt return, I believe. Maybe it was a kick return. It might have been. I think it was a kick return. The defense largely held Manning in check throughout the majority of the game until obviously it was Peyton time late in the second half. Even with Mathis out, Colts defense looks much improved. Is there anything that the Broncos are going to try to do different, or are they going to assume that they've got the upper hand with Mathis on the shelf for the first week at least in their game, to try to keep Peyton clean?
I don't think they'll assume that they have an upper hand with Mathis out. I think they've broken down the film. They've seen that there is ways that the Colts can get pressure without Mathis on the field. I mean, I watched a few of the starting drives from the Colts for the preseason, and I was able to see it every once in a while, that they were able to generate pressure from Warner and can't remember the other guy.
DeQuell Jackson's been getting throwing a lot of stunts in there, and he's looked good coming up the middle. It makes me wonder how much he blitz Peyton. How deadly it's going to end up being as a result if you don't get to him.
Yeah, that's definitely a risk. If you don't hit him, he has such a quick release and it's hard to match up with the Broncos receivers just in terms of size.
Mm-hmm.
They have some really big. They have a couple big receivers in Cody Latimer and Demaryius Thomas. And Manning's been on record saying that Demaryius Thomas is the biggest receiver he's ever played with. He's 6'3", 6'4", and about between 230 and 240 pounds.
Yeah,
and then,
he's a massive guy. There's for sure.
Oh yeah, and then that's not even Julius Thomas, who's a massive tight end, who's not the most adept blocker, but he is very, very, very good as a receiver. He does such an excellent job of finding the opening and being able to exploit it. And I think getting pressure on Manning from the Colts will rely just as much as the Colts secondary being able to stick with the coverages and allowing Peyton to hold the ball just for a few moments of fractions of a second longer to cause more pressure.
Mm-hmm. Bring in Jake Arthur here. How you doing, Jake?
Excellent. How you doing?
Good, man. Good. Thank you for coming in tonight. I believe you got a question or two for Eric as well.
Yeah, I was just thinking about one thing was how the Broncos were going to use the new combination of DeMarcus Ware and Von Miller. Do you think they'll stack them up on the same side or kind of put them on different sides to close up Andrew Luck's pocket completely?
That's actually an interesting question. The fan part of me really wants to see them lined up on the same side. I think it will be incredibly dangerous. It's something that I saw the Texans do with Watt and Clowney, and it was really, really effective. And I think that it could be just as effective for the Broncos. However, I don't think they actually will. I think they will keep them each on one side and help keep Luck contained in the pocket, forcing him to step up and then face the interior pressure that Terrence Knighton and Sylvester Williams should be providing.
Okay, yeah, because when that happens, when Luck gets pressure from both sides, he has a tendency to climb the pocket, and a lot of the times will end up running up the gut and pick big chunks of yardage. Do you think the kind of weakened linebacking core right now without Trevathan, do you think they'll be able to hold up at the second level of the defense?
Well, Brandon Marshall stepping in for Danny Trevathan, who fractured part of his leg, and but I think Brandon Marshall will be able to step up. He showed it in preseason action that he's capable of it. He also has the green dot on the helmet. He's in charge of the defense. He's leading them, and it really looks like they won't miss a step without Trevathan on the field. And then Jack Del Rio, his defensive system schemes are built to see the weak side linebacker successful. We saw it for Denver. We saw it in 2012 with Wesley Woodyard. We saw it last year with Danny Trevathan. It forces a lot of it. It forces them to see a lot of success. Even back in his Jacksonville Jaguars days, when he was the head coach, it was a lot of the same thing. You saw a lot of success from the low linebackers.
Okay, and I had one more here for you. Now, the Colts are dealing with Robert Mathis being suspended for the first 4 games for, performance-enhancing drug issues. Same can be said for Wes Welker, arguably with, testing positive for Molly. With him out, we were talking off camera about that might actually change soon, but let's just say he's out still. Who do you expect to have an increased workload? You think Cody Latimer will be kind of forced in there early if they think he's ready?
If you go and check out what more the fans think, they all are jumping on the Cody Latimer train. I'm thinking that we will see more of what Denver did last year without Walker, since he missed a few games with the concussion last season also. And that was they threw Jacob Tamme in the slot pretty often. and they were successful with it. And then they also threw Eric Decker into the slot and brought Andre Caldwell out as the other outside receiver, and they were pretty successful doing that as well. And then they also, as I'm sure everybody knows, they went out and signed Emmanuel Sanders, who was the slot receiver in Pittsburgh, and he also should be see some time in the slot. So I don't think it's exactly one person's going to see an increased workload. If it was anybody, I think it'll be Sanders. I think he would be seeing more time on the field with either in as the number 2 receiver or as in the slot position. And then when he takes over the slot, you'll probably see Cody Latimer step in or Andre Caldwell. And then if he stays out as the number 2, you'll probably see Jacob Tamme. And also, there's also a big potential of seeing more 2 tight end sets with Virgil Green, Julius Thomas, and then Demaryius Thomas and Emmanuel Sanders out on the field as well. Because the Broncos are putting a lot more emphasis on running the ball this year, according to the coaches, and the 2 tight end sets may be able to help balance that out. And then
sounds like Chuck Pagano and Pep Hamilton past couple years.
Yeah.
Sounds like everybody's got the same story.
Well, as seen from the Seahawks, got to be able to play defense and run the ball to win a Super Bowl.
Yeah.
Denver was, I don't want to say they were bad at running the ball. They were not the most effective team running the ball. Mm-hmm. They got a lot of their chunks of the yards were in the in the running game time to run down the clock. And I don't think that they'll be the same this year. I think they want to be more effective and therefore better running the ball. And wouldn't be surprised to see ball early and often in this game.
I was gonna ask you that going forward here. That was another one of my questions. Last season, the Colts ran for 120 on the Broncos. Sean Moreno only picked up around 40, and he was the leading rusher for the game. Do you see? I mean, obviously, you're talking about Ball getting the workload, but that only lasts for so long. A lot of times with Peyton. If something works, he sticks with it. A lot of times, do you see Ball getting more than 20 carries Sunday night?
For the most part, yes. It really depends on the way the game goes. Obviously, if they get down early, I think they will be going more towards the pass to get the ball into the playmakers' hands of Emmanuel Sanders and Demaryius Thomas, both of whom are a threat to take a high yard, go for 70 yards. Mm-hmm. If the game is close or the Broncos get ahead, I wouldn't be surprised at all to see Ball get over 20 carries. And he's a tough, big, physical runner, and he's hard to take down. He showed that in his limited action against the Texans, and so I think it's going to be a lot different from last year with Sean Moreno.
Yeah, I would agree, and I can definitely say that it's a completely different team on both sides of the ball. They brought in all the free agents and so on, and it's going to be just a brand new team playing a team that really doesn't. I mean, it's really ultimately 2 brand new teams. The Colts don't have Mathis. Denver's got their guys that they brought in the offseason on defense, especially. Decker's no longer there. Emmanuel Sanders is nothing, and him and Eric Decker are nothing alike. They are not the same receiver. So it's going to be a whole new look all the way around. One of the things that kind of has me seeing, we're used to seeing Peyton at the line of scrimmage play around in a lot of different areas. And the one thing that gets me is when I see who Julius Thomas is lined up on, Demaryius Thomas, who's lined up across from him, I'm interested to see where they go with that. Does Peyton bring him into the slot from outside to create that matchup from hell with a linebacker or, with no nickel corner in, or, because the past couple of years, last year Landry missed a lot of open field tackles, especially across the center of the field. That quick catch and run has been a deadly combination for the Colts defense in the past couple of years. uh, do you see that? Do you see with Demarius coming in along in motion, getting himself into the slot a lot? Especially, you know what, and I think they'll probably do it on a lot of run plays too. Peyton's tricky; he'll bring him for everything. There's a couple different ways that he can set his own edge, so to speak. And what do you think about what he'll be doing at the line of scrimmage with Demarius?
Um, Honestly, it just comes down to I think he's going to do what something kind of that most quarterbacks do. I think he's going to try to get Demarius Thomas in the mismatch that works in Denver's favor.
Mm-hmm.
And if it's outside against, I don't know much about the Colts cornerbacks or their size, but if he's lined up against somebody and he has a big size advantage, I think he'll keep him matched up there instead of moving him to somewhere where the Colts may match up better. And then if it's in the slot, then I think you'll easily bring him in here. And I wouldn't be surprised to see him kind of lined up in closer to the line, kind of like a tight end, which they showed few times in the preseason.
Yeah. The as far as the Colts corners, I'd say physically wise, it's kind of a toss up between Vontae and Toller. Toller, I believe Toller's a little bit bigger overall. Obviously, Darius Butler is our slot corner, and there really isn't a good matchup with Demarius Thomas with just about anybody. You get him on a linebacker and it's bad for the linebacker. You get him on a slot corner and it's bad too because it's really just it's a basketball game where he's blocking out in the paint and he's getting the ball. I mean, 5-6 yard catch is everything to Peyton, and all it is his motion and getting himself in a rhythm for the beginning of the game. Jake, what do you think about that? That's one of the things that we've talked about a lot. Is Luck getting himself into a rhythm, and can he get those plays that aren't at 0, -1, or at the line of scrimmage to start the game? Can he get himself in some positive plays and not overthink too much and just get the ball in with some positive yardage and get his chunks and be happy with what he's got with a 5-6 yard play every couple plays?
Oh, first to touch on the Demarius Thomas topic real quick. Vontae Davis actually had arguably his best game of 2013 paired up against Thomas last year. I don't know if that's something Peyton and the Broncos will be concerned about, or if they'll just try it again. But Davis is capable of holding his own against Thomas. Now, when you talk about Luck now getting into some rhythm, I think it really just depends on what the game plan is. I think we've seen game plans forced and, just beaten to death without adapting to how the game is actually occurring. I think Pep Hamilton's got a little better at that, and I think they're starting to give Luck a little more freedom to just do his thing. Personally, I think they definitely can do that, but they're going to be facing a killer pass rush from the Broncos. So I think what they really need to do is get Trent Richardson involved in the screen passing game, and I think they need to get some quick short routes going quickly because the offensive line is obviously a concern, and they're going to be facing an above-average pass rush. So they need to get the ball out of Luck's hands quickly so they can get some rhythm. And I think we've all seen by now Hakeem Nicks has some excellent run-after-the-catch ability. We know T.Y. Hilton can do that as well. So I think it's just a matter of imposing their will, but at the same time taking what the Broncos give them.
Eric, if I'm a Broncos fan, what do I want to see from my defense trying to get Luck off his spot, other than just getting constant pressure? The basic ho-hum answer as far as just getting his pocket dirty. What's the one thing that you see as his biggest downfall that could open up some doors for Denver's defense?
It's actually one thing that I actually really like about his game, but it's something that always concerns me whenever any quarterback does it, and that's when he takes off running. When you take off running, you're going to get hit if he doesn't slide. And normally, from what I've seen of Luck running, he normally tends to slide and everything. But if he doesn't, he's going to take some hits, and I don't know how he seems pretty resilient when he gets hit,
Mm-hmm.
kind of like Ben Roethlisberger was. When
Right.
he would get hit, get sacked, he would bounce back up almost right away and be fine. But I think that's going to be something that's going to have to watch out for is luck running and getting hit if he takes off, and just got to be concerned about that always as a defense.
Is that
And
something that they're going to be running with their middle linebackers, a delayed stunt to kind of try and maybe get him in a dirty pocket and then send a late blitz at him?
wouldn't surprise me. Nate Irving's taken over the middle linebacker position, and he has some experience, actually quite a bit of experience, getting after the quarterback when he stepped in for Von Miller last year at the Sam linebacker position.
Mm-hmm.
So I wouldn't be surprised to see him coming in on a lot of fronts, especially with he's not the best coverage linebacker. He's best against the run and getting after the quarterback. So I wouldn't be surprised at all to see them quite a bit bringing him on a delayed blitz or stuff like that.
Yeah, I think that's kind of something that you have to think about as a as an offensive coordinator in Pep Hamilton, knowing that the Broncos are going to put about everything that they've got on Andrew Luck. They're going to try to get him pressure, whereas typically a good passer, you don't. Just the same with Peyton. You know, Peyton, you don't blitz that dude because he will absolutely pick you apart in a heartbeat. With Luck, they're going to take their chances because of the offensive line. They're going to try and get through, and if they can get somebody in there in a second and a half, they're going to get a piece of luck one way or another, whether it's after the throw or whether it's on the throw, and that is really what they're trying, what you want to try to do. Last year, Luck didn't throw any on their defense. Granted, I know it's a different defense. I'm not trying to compare them as in structure, only in that they are Denver's defense. They didn't force Luck into any turnovers last year. Um, is there a way that they can get Luck, or that you can see them getting Luck to throw a pick? And if so, would it be more attributed to having a better secondary and a better overall defense, or would it be Luck forcing the ball and trying to make something out of nothing?
Well, to take a quick step back, I actually forgot about something with the getting the pressure on Luck, kind of on a delayed blitz, and that's T.J. Ward.
Mm-hmm.
T.J. Ward is an excellent run defender and an excellent blitzer, and I think that is something that is also concerning. Mm-hmm. Now, to your current question is, I think it'll be a combination of both. Last year, when the Broncos were able to get pressure on the quarterback, their secondary fell apart early. When they were able to keep their secondary on their men and everything, they weren't able to get pressure. I think this year that it's going to be more balanced out, that you will see when the Broncos do get pressure on the quarterback, in this case Luck, that you will see a lot more of their defensive backs sticking with their men and keeping them well covered. And so if with the pressure that comes on Luck, if he tries to force something, I can easily see them going for being aggressive and taking that pick, or going for that pick, especially with Aqib Talib and Chris Harris.
Yeah, their secondary is far better than it was last year. There's no doubt about it. At least on paper, that's yet to be determined. But looking ahead, it's something for us to think about too, because there's going to be a lot of hands going for the same ball. Jake, what do you think that we see out of Pep? I know that a lot depends on his game plan. Are we going to see 3 draw plays, first 3? For about 6 yards, or is there a better chance that we see something like we saw at San Diego Week 4 last year, and a bit of a flea flicker to start the game?
You really never know. Last year was more of a learning curve, but the play calling last year against Denver was actually went really well.
Mm-hmm.
I was just kind of browsing Twitter the other day, and I noticed Kyle Rodriguez kind of posted up a diagram of the play Darius Hayward-Bay scored on, where he went in motion, and then once the ball was hiked, he sprinted back kind of on a reverse wheel route. It was a real weird play, but it worked beautifully. You really never know. Yeah, you really never know. He could open up the game with a flea flicker or something you and I both seen in person, and now they've been doing in the preseason. Is it seems like they like to give Dante Moncrief the ball on the reverse. You just really never know.
Hmm.
Some things I'd really like to see. I back in the day we were used to seeing Robert Mathis and Dwight Freeney coming off the edge. When the Colts run defense was real bad, those two would come off the edge and the opposing offense would be able to utilize the draw play as those two defensive ends fly past the backfield. There goes the running back with two massive lanes. I'd
Hmm.
kind of like to see them do that with Richardson if they can capitalize on Miller and Ware doing that.
Right.
If not, they can do that with screen passes. Here come the edge rushers. Dump the ball off to Richardson. He's got big soft zones near the line of scrimmage. I would just like to see them more take advantage of what Denver gives them.
Hmm. I agree. Um, there was something I think that a lot of us, echoed last season, wanting to get Trent more involved in the passing game, screen games. He is a beast. There isn't anybody that breaks more tackles than that guy, other than maybe beast mode. And he's not going to shy away from contact. He doesn't fumble the ball, but the guy has got vision problems right now,
Unless it's
or
the playoffs
something.
against Kansas City.
Yeah, and he has got to get his lanes figured out, and he's got to know where he's going, and follow his blocks accordingly, or he's going to have another tough, difficult season.
Yeah.
Um, Eric, is there any questions that you've got for us?
Yeah, actually, a couple of them have sort of been touched on, but one of them is about the player you were just talking about, in Trent Richardson. I know last year that I didn't can't remember when it was during the Broncos game last year, but there was one point, it was closer towards the end of the game, and the Colts were driving to run down the clock. They had the lead and everything. It came after a Ronnie Hillman fumble right at the end zone, I think. And
Mm-hmm.
then Trent Richardson turns it around and fumbles the ball. And you kind of touched up on about the fact that his fumbling and then his vision. But this is more of between about the offensive line than him. From my understanding, there is a big mess with the Colts offensive line. There's a couple starters hurt, I believe, if I read the thing correctly.
Mm-hmm.
And not to mention that the Broncos are back and healthy, and even last year their run defense was vastly underrated. And this year I would assume and expect them to be even better than last year. So my question is kind of, how do you expect the offensive line to open those lanes for Trent Richardson, especially when you have 350 pounds of pot roast in the way? Or
Jake, you want to take this one, bud?
Well, the unfortunate answer is we just don't know. At offensive tackle, we have Anthony Costanzo and Gazzer Cherilus. It doesn't get a whole lot better than that as far as a pair of tackles go, but it's the interior that's always been the issue. Donald Thomas was brought in last offseason to be kind of a stalwart at left guard, but has suffered 2 consecutive season-ending injuries. And so now rookie Jack Mewhort is supposed to be there. Right off the bat, he looks better than what we had at left guard last year. Hugh Thornton was another rookie forced to start at left guard last year and did not do well. Second year Khaled Holmes is kind of supposed to be the starting center. He's dealing with an ankle issue right now. Not to mention Mewhort had been dealing with a kind of a minor knee tweak the last several weeks. Right guard, honestly, is the most dependable that we might see as far as the interior goes, because it is Hugh Thornton. He's another second-year player, but he's got an entire year of starting experience. In terms of the rushing attack on offense, it hasn't looked good. Richardson does not seem to pick the correct lanes, and there's not many lanes there to even be open. So that's two big issues kind of colliding. I don't know. It's honestly, it's hard to say if Richardson is the right back for the current offensive line because he is not decisive enough, although he has gotten better. We've seen Boom Heron be much more decisive and kind of hit lanes like lightning during the preseason. And it's kind of lofty to say he's the third string running back, but that's someone I've been calling on to at least get some looks with the first team. That he doesn't have to be handed the job. Let's just see what he can do. Maybe he is the back for that first string offensive line.
Mm-hmm. I'm going to touch on this too for just a second. It's and I agree with you on that with Heron. I have absolutely no problem with them. There doesn't need to be a bell cow in this Colts offense, in my opinion. There isn't any of them that are blowing anybody away outside of Boom Heron, and I think that he's ran well, but the guy's not. He's impressing people more because they don't expect to be impressed by him. I think more than anything, and and Trent is one thing I noticed as far as last year to this year. He wasn't decisive. He didn't hit his holes. There was no burst out of his stance, none at all. I mean, it was like he was tiptoeing until he could find the hole, and by the time he was done tiptoeing, he was already hitting the backfield 2 yards and behind the line of scrimmage. This year I've noticed he is more decisive. He may or may not be hitting the right hole or finding the right seam, but he is quite a bit more decisive, and he does have more of a burst. There was a game, and I believe it was against the Saints, where he had 6 carries, and on the 2 carries where he got past the line of scrimmage before first contact from the defense, he averaged 6.5 yards a carry. On his last 4 carries, he was hit an average of, I think, 1.5 yards in the backfield, and he averaged 1 yard a carry. I mean, so if we're looking at who to blame, it's all of them. There's no doubt. This year, their offensive line, they got A.Q. Shipley back. He's not as diverse as maybe even a Khaled Holmes or a Jack Mewhort, but I see them, if they can get any sort of a chemistry going whatsoever along that interior, I think that they have the ability to surprise a lot of people. I really do. Last year we saw that with A.Q. Shipley when he came in, and when Sattel was out, the offensive line was always better. It really, but that was just to follow up with what Jake said. There is a lot of question marks in this offensive line and in the backfield. Nobody knows anything about Ahmad Bradshaw right now other than what 10 or 12 carries that he's had in the preseason, and the guy just came out of neck surgery. I don't want to say I'm scared for him, but I don't really expect much from him, to be quite honest with you. I'd like to say that we will see him in the small spurt that we saw him last year when he was blowing up against the 49ers, but if he's not healthy and he can't take a head-on collision from one of the linebackers, it could be a dangerous time. So it kind of makes you wonder one way or the other. There's really not a right answer for it. There's just a bunch of different excuses and reasons why we would believe what we could believe. So, you got anything else, Eric, for us?
Yeah, I had a couple other questions. Another one is with the Broncos having, on paper, obviously, hasn't really been seen. They're a pass rush that's could arguably be one of the best in the NFL this year. Would you expect to see a lot more quick passes to try to negate that rush and give Luck, or not Luck, but give the receivers a chance to make a play?
I do. If you're going to be doing some quick bubble screens, uh, to Wayne or even to Ty. Um, but I mean, really, anybody in the Colts wide receiver core fits that bill. They're all fairly good and applicable for the screen game. The biggest problem with me is where do you really want to throw something down the line of scrimmage towards him with them big old paws up in the air, and do you want to risk it that often? I don't think so. I'd be honest. I didn't expect a whole lot out of Dwayne Allen in the preseason. I thought they were going to inch him back. I didn't see him getting a whole lot of catches. I think that they're going to use the seam a lot with him this year. That was one thing 2 years ago when he was healthy. A lot of his late routes were where he got his catches. I'm sorry, at the top of a lot of his longer routes were where he got a lot of his catches. Um, I think that it's a fine line with how you game plan around this defense when unless you're going to just flat out take what is successful and continue to find other plays to isolate outside linebackers, you get them upfield, pinching the inside linebacker or something like that. I think that they've got a lot that they need to work on, and I'd be honest. I think Talib is a little overrated. I think he's a good player. He's a very solid corner. He's one of the top 10 to 12 corners in the league. There's no doubt about it. The guy is about as fundamental, though. Um, and I'm trying to be a smart aleck here. I can't really say what, but I don't see him being a fundamental guy with the disciplined routes that Reggie Wayne and some of these guys run, especially T.Y. Hilton. I don't see Talib being a huge factor in this game. He's a couple years older and a couple injuries past where he was, in the past couple years. But their defense is no doubt it's bigger, and if they're getting pressure on Luck and if they're getting stops in the run game, that makes Talib that much better, and it makes all of them that much better, really. Jake, you got anything on that?
Yeah, that strategy is something I'd like to see. That's really something I'd love to see most times when there's going to be a good pass rush coming up against the Colts. Uh, we kind of did see that against the New York Jets in the very first preseason game. The Colts had an inferior offensive line compared to the Jets' front seven. Arguably one of the best 3-4 defensive lines in the league. Right off the bat, they got some quick passes off to Hilton and Nix, and I'd like to see that again. But another strategy I think they could utilize is, send T.Y. Hilton deep, take the top off the defense, and leave some big open cushions in the middle of the field. That's why I think someone like Dwayne Allen is going to have a big impact on the game, because he is going against relatively inexperienced linebackers. I don't want to downplay those linebackers at all, but those guys aren't the guys you would fully plan on starting. So if he can win those matchups and there's already kind of an open cushion in the middle of the field and, down the outside of the hash marks, I think that could be where the Colts win as far as their offense goes.
I got when we look over here at the schedules for both teams. I tell you what, these first 4 weeks for both teams are a little stiff. Well, I'll say 5 weeks for Denver, with obviously their opening night game Sunday. But the Colts, or I'm sorry, the Broncos, they'll play home the first 2 weekends. They'll play the Chiefs next weekend, then they go to the Seahawks, and then they stay in the NFC West in Week 5 after their bye. That's a tall order for these Broncos. Don't get me wrong, you're not going to see a whole lot of Peyton Manning getting shut down. Nevertheless, you've got some games right there that could, if we're going straight possibility here, we could see the Broncos at a 1-3 or a 2-2 going into Week 5. Or I'm sorry, going into Week 6. What's your thoughts on their schedule, Eric?
I actually think that that with how it is, their schedule is, I think that their bottom line that we'll see them coming out is at 2-2. I don't think we'll see them coming out with 3 losses. Um, Obviously, the Seahawks are a threat. They are always a threat, as are the Colts. The Colts are Luck is just such an amazing player, and in about 10 years or so, I wouldn't be surprised if he's being talked about as one of the greatest ever. But the two things is the Chiefs and the Cardinals. I don't see how the Chiefs got better.
I agree.
They took a few steps back. They lost a couple big guys on their interior offensive line, and Jeff Schwartz and can't remember that guy's name off the top of my head. And then their defense is still a threat though. The Chiefs defense is it's kind of like facing Luck. The Chiefs defense is always a threat. I mean, you have Tamba Hali, Justin Houston, and Derek Johnson. Those are that is one of the best trios of defensive players in the NFL.
Mm-hmm.
But as Denver showed last year, that they can stop that pass rush. Chris Clark and Orlando Franklin had some of their best games stopping Houston and Hali. But second game, of course, they were both dealing with injuries. But they were still able to move the ball quite effectively, and some of it was behind the leg power of Noshawn Marino. And then, obviously there's always a chance that Denver loses. I just have a hard time seeing it happen. Against the Cardinals, their offense, Carson Palmer is very prone to trying to force a pass, and that often leads to a turnover. And I think that Denver, I think Cardinals also still have a pretty big mess on their offensive line as well, which is something that Denver should be able to exploit and force mistakes. On the other side of the ball, before about a month ago, I would have said that the Cardinals have one of the most underrated defenses in the NFL. And then you saw a suspension handed out, saw a couple key injuries. I mean, they still have one of the best corners in the game in Patrick Peterson, and then Tyrann Mathieu as at safety, which are always a threat. But after them, it's kind of hard to see where they're going to be able to cause pressure, force mistakes, and stop this Broncos offense that is still, if not the best offense in the NFL, one of the best offenses in the NFL. So at worst, I see them coming out 2-2.
Mm-hmm. I would agree with that. It's hard to assume. You always feel like you've got a chance with Peyton on your team, and there's just no way for you to look. You don't look past anybody, but at the same time, you definitely know that there isn't anybody looking past you if Peyton's your signal caller. Yeah. Jake, we're somewhat in the same boat, just not so much with the guaranteed competition. We're more in a rivalry situation for the first 4 weeks after the Broncos and Eagles. We play the Jags in week 3, and that's at Jacksonville, and then Tennessee at home. And there's always that one game. Last year we won all 6 in the division. I have a hard time thinking we're going to win all 6 again this year. It's just something that doesn't happen often, regardless. And we saw a bad game the first week, the first game that we played Jacksonville in Jacksonville last year. Luck did not start right. Almost threw a pick on the first series, and then he did throw a pick on the second series. Colts come back to take that game, but the Jaguars and Titans have some fantastic head coaches right now in Bradley or Ken Wisenhunt, and these guys are fantastic head coaches, and they've got their system in place, and they know what they're doing. I think that I see the Jaguars being a real threat to the Colts and a lot of teams this season, and not just a 4 or 5 win team, especially if they can, the Jaguars, if they can get Bortles on the field. I think there's a lot of people in Jacksonville hoping for a turf toe incident for Chad Henne to see Blake Bortles getting his time, and then we're going to end up going through the same old thing with Jake Locker in Tennessee. Is he going to be durable? Is he going to be the guy back there in the pocket throwing the ball, or is he going to be the guy on the sidelines that everybody's talking about is getting shipped out next year?
Yeah, that first 4 game stretch is pretty tough, and I also don't see the Colts sweeping the division again either. Something I mentioned to Kenneth Goett from our Tennessee lead writer. I don't know that the Colts win both those games last year if Jake Locker is in there instead of Ryan Fitzpatrick.
Mm-hmm.
Um, he Locker can execute. He doesn't make those critical mistakes, but he's also hard to scout because he's hardly ever on the field. But he did do very well last year before suffering those injuries that eventually put him out for the year.
Mm-hmm.
In Jacksonville, I think Bortles is going to be starting a lot sooner than people think. Randy Gorham and Frank Scaduto, some of our Jaguars writers, they've picked up on something they've been told that Chad Henne has a clause in that new contract that he signed this year, and part of the language in it says that he's guaranteed at least one start. So why not get it out of the way in week 1?
Right.
You know, whatever he does, they know Bortles is probably the way to go. So I really think Bortles will be in there before most people think. That's just something I'm hearing a lot. Is why wouldn't they start Bortles immediately? And it's like, honestly, if they could, they would, but that's not common knowledge at all.
Right.
And I can't confirm it. It's just what I've heard, and it makes complete sense given the situation. But back to the rest of the division, I guess we still got Houston. I think Ryan Mallett improves that team. I don't think he's going to be anything spectacular, but he isn't Ryan Fitzpatrick. Even if he can come in and take care of the game and manage it and not blow the game, that's something Fitzpatrick does tend to do.
Right.
And heading into the draft, I said, Houston is still built to win right now. They just need a quarterback, which is why I was in favor of them taking Bridgewater. If they can even get a consistent, average game-managing quarterback, and if Mallett can come in and start in the next few weeks and do that, then I think Houston immediately becomes a playoff team of that caliber, at least once again. So no, the Colts sweeping the division again almost doesn't make sense. Although I do still see them in the 12-win range. There's simply some tough games in there that it'd be almost ignorant to say they're going to win it all, or not win it all, but take all those games, go 14-2, 15-1.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you got to kick off against Denver. Right away that's Super Bowl runner-up. Then you have to turn around and face Philadelphia the next week without your best defensive player against 2 of the league's best offenses back-to-back.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of my quick outlook on that.
I believe I've got them going at 10-6 for the season. I don't think that's too far off one way or the other. There's a good chance they could be up to around 11 or 12 wins. However, like we've already said, we don't see them winning or sweeping the division. That's just something that doesn't happen very often. Regardless, I don't care if you're in podunk. You don't sweep your division very often. I mean, the Colts start off against Broncos and Eagles. I think that the Colts are better than the Eagles overall. I think they've got, obviously we still have our offensive line issues. I think the Eagles' pace is not going to affect our defense quite as much. I think we've got a lot of depth at D-line. We have good depth at linebacker, and we've got a good secondary. I don't think that their fast-paced offense does enough to our defense to run us off the field. But there's just that same possibility that we could start the season 0-2. We could start 1-3 if the Jags or the Titans get to us, and then we got the Ravens go to Houston. the Bengals, they beat us last year. They're a fantastic defense. Their offense is a little suspect at times, but they've got the playmakers. There's no doubt about it. The Steelers are always dangerous. That's a probably less of a pick'em game. However, you could really flip a coin a lot of times against the Steelers, and you're not going to be wrong too much more than you're going to be right. Um, Giants, Pats, Jags, Redskins, the Browns. Obviously, you would like to say that we're going to beat them, and then finishing the season at home against Houston, at Dallas, and then at Tennessee. I believe that I've got the Colts getting beat against the Titans in that last game of the year. Um, it's just an odd schedule this year, where teams who are up and comers just aren't. They're not dominant, they're not blowing anybody away, but man, they have just as much chance as anybody. And I think that the Broncos are really in that same case, Eric. After that first 4-game stretch, and then going into Week 6, they play at New York at the Jets. Doesn't look like that there's much the Jets can do to stop them. I'm sorry, they have a fantastic run defense, but that really seems to be about their ceiling on defense. But again, NFC West match up with the 49ers after that, Chargers, Patriots, another division game against the Raiders, the Rams, Dolphins, division at Kansas City, Buffalo, probably a blowout there. You can't push aside Phillip Rivers though anymore, can you?
Oh no, he proved that last season, Thursday night coming to Denver, and not many people realize this, but Phillip Rivers has some of his best games come in Denver. He, for some reason, it normally when they come into Denver, that mile high air, everything it gets to him. Phillip Rivers, it's like it's a boost to him.
Yeah,
He just plays excellently.
yeah.
And,
He was the thorn in the Colts side for a long time, and still kind of is, right?
yeah.
I don't even want to talk about it.
Yeah, he gets to us quite a bit. Again, then after that second matchup in San Diego, the Broncos finish up in Cincinnati and then in home against Oakland. I don't think that you'd be too far-fetched to assume that both teams could be anywhere from 10-6 to 12-4 this year, and both win their division. But they may be one of the bottom 4 seeds in the playoffs. Jake, is that a possibility that you can see them and then see the Patriots and some other teams there take the first 2 spots over these guys?
Yeah. In terms of the Broncos, I don't know. I still see the Broncos going, 12, 13, 14 wins. It's just, I don't know. I really like that defense. I think it's going to take a little time for them to gel just because they have some new pieces to work in. But I think by mid-season, I think they'll really be a really impressive defense. TJ Ward, I think that's a pretty underrated move. He's really good. Someone most Colts fans wanted here to replace Antoine Bethea. Talib is a physical corner. We don't know how that'll work with how they're enforcing the rules now, but he's definitely above average. He's a definitely good replacement for losing Rogers Cromartie. Chris Harris, one of the most underrated defensive backs in the game. I just really like that defense. I think that'll help carry them a long way. I just think they got absolutely embarrassed against the Seahawks, and it, made them rethink things. And I think they've made the moves to change exactly what they needed to.
Mm-hmm. I agree. And again, you can catch us all at profootballspot.com. Jake is on is our lead writer for Spot Colts. I'm also a team journalist. Eric is lead writer over there at Spot Broncos. And Eric, how can they catch you on Twitter and other places?
You can catch me at Twitter at Alaskan Bronco. Um, I'm on there often, and it's always easy to find me there, get a hold of me. I enjoy talking about football, especially on Twitter. So, everywhere else, I actually tend to keep more private. So,
Jake, how about you? Where can everybody get a hold of you?
Yep, I am on the old Twitter machine there, at Jake Arthur ISR. You can also catch me around the Pro Football site, uh, Pro Football Spot message boards and all that. I'm usually perusing around there. Yep, hit me up on Twitter.
And as a reminder, at Pro Football Spot, go to profootballspot.com. You can sign up for free, become a member, talk with us in your forum, set up your own thread, get something that you want answered. We have a ton of writers, a ton of bright minds, and it's really good. Everybody welcomes you to the forums, and it's just it's a real nice place to be able to talk nothing but football. You can go to any of your writers for whatever team you want to know something about, and they're more than happy to help you, or at least have the conversation with you for sure. It's a great place. ProFootballSpot.com. You can catch me at mdanley_PFS on Twitter. Also here on Google. And gentlemen, Jake and Eric, appreciate your time tonight. Had a good time talking this first matchup here. Questions with the Enemy is the name of this series. We'll be doing this weekly. And guys, thank you for coming. I appreciate it. And thanks for all the insight, Eric.
Yeah.
Good to get some inside information there on a lot of that stuff up there in Mile High. Jake, great talking to you as always. Gentlemen, have a good night, and thank you for joining us here on Spot Colts Radio.
All right, thank you, brother. Talk at you soon.
thank you.